So we're going to cover the difference between a POP, a point of parity, and a point of difference. We're going to share with you some research that is truly at your fingertips that can help you get to the point of differentiation. And then we're going to share with you that difference grid and show you how ultimately this model can help you build the points of difference that are important. We're not going to go through this slide, but I'm just going to kind of tease what is up next. So we're going to talk a little bit today about competition, but we're going to focus on POP and POD. This is positioning for success. All of these components that you see here, the competition, POP, unique attributes, value, customers that care, market that you can win in, are what we are going to be covering in future sessions. So I just want to tease that all with you so that you can understand and see where we are taking this Q&A series, and hopefully you'll tune in for the future ones as well. Okay, so let's focus today, POP, POD. So we've already talked a little bit about the core difference here, points of parity and points of difference, but I want to bring it to life through some real life examples to begin with before we roll up our sleeves and get clinical, if you will. So let's take a look at Wells Fargo. This is for you, Michelle. Wells Fargo is a Goliath in banking and checking and savings accounts. If we think through points of parity for them, branches with convenient locations, the checking and savings accounts, online banking, plenty of ATMs, all of these elements are components. They're must-haves in order for someone to get to the decision-making process. So if you don't have those, you're not even going to be considered. And I was thinking about this morning. ATMs, by the way, are even becoming a little backdated from a technology standpoint because we can just use the Zells and the instant cash transfer tools today of the past. But nonetheless, it's a point of parity. For banks to truly differentiate, it can happen through messaging, it can happen through customer, but another example is higher interest rates on CDs, no closing costs on home loans, better cashback rewards. All those sort of things are points of difference that really help someone see why they should perhaps be working with you. Let's take FedEx. This is a great case study. FedEx wrote the book on overnight delivery, right? They were the first to ultimately say that they could capture market share and really set the stage with when it absolutely positively has to get there overnight. What has happened to overnight delivery? It's the sea of sameness now, right? So their point of differentiation became a point of parity, which is one of the reasons why we constantly need to be working on the POP-POD grid. Sometimes it's months, sometimes it's years, but it's why we constantly have to be paying attention to that and making sure that we are moving it along. So when making a buying decision, most consumers have that short list of vendors that they're going to consider with those features and the benefits that we've just illustrated. But without them, you're not even a part of that game plan, as I noted earlier. So this is a very, very important point when you are deciding which POP and POD you want to be able to hang your hat on. So again, to illustrate this, the point of parity is really what positions you with legitimacy. It is the table stakes we use a lot in our conversations. It's what gets people to say, okay, they're at least a consideration. POD is why the product or service is the best option over the competition. And you'll see some examples here in just a minute on sometimes it becomes very, very difficult because your points of parity, yes, they're table stakes. Everyone has the same thing. It's that sea of sameness. And one of the only ways that you can differentiate is ultimately through creative execution or taking customer service to the next level, something like that. The audience ultimately considers differentiation important, but it's what helps them differentiate in their own minds why you are more important than the competition. So again, these points of parity should be mentioned, but they're not the core message. Let's take an example of brands that we can all relate to very, very well. We all need that mint every once in a while. Mentos, Clarets, and even Halls, although most people use it more for a throat lozenger than they do a true mint. These three brands consider themselves core competitors. So the point of parities are, they're all mint candies. They all have packaging in various sizes. They're a similar size, similar prices, and they've all got that fresh taste, right? How are they able to differentiate? One way Mentos does that is through product. So they've got different flavors and different colors. Still the same shape, but it is something that differentiates them. And by the way, they're the longest product in the marketplace. So there's some cachet with that they hang their hat on. Clarets has got that wonderful green solid color. Now this is something that they really made up. Actazole is an active ingredient that eliminates mouth odor. It doesn't do it any better than anyone else, by the way, but they hung their hat on that from differentiation to create more importance around their brand. And then of course, Halls fights the cough, it soothes the throat, so on and so forth. So you can see how ultimately these brands have been able to differentiate themselves with ease with some very, very simple approaches. So let's take a look at some other brands that are doing this really well in the marketplace right now. Okay, this doesn't necessarily, this brand may not be too attractive to all of us, but T-Mobile has done a phenomenal job differentiating itself in the marketplace. They create messaging that is directly aimed at customers' biggest pain points away from the biggest competitors' flaws, which is the size of their network. If you imagine all of the blue United States maps, or I'm sorry, the pink United States maps that are out there, that's a very important visual for differentiation with this brand. And they've been able to hang their hat on it for a very long time, by the way. And they really are positioning themselves with a younger market, males and females, and they've been able to create pink that is very cool to guys as well. So what they've done here to differentiate is something very deliberate, and they've allowed customers to unlock their phones and immediately switch to T-Mobile without fees to the competitors as well. So this has several layers of differentiation from product, from look and feel, from messaging, from going directly after the competitor, which are all considerations when we're talking and positioning ourselves. This is one that I think that is pretty obvious to all of us, and certainly Tesla has taken the market by storm, not only through their superior technology and their futuristic design, but their Mars-loving CEO is, I mean, everyone just wants to follow this guy from a thought leadership standpoint, and they've really done a great job. So that's some product enhancements, right? But let's take a look at the selling process here. They've simplified it. You actually order a Tesla online. You talk about exactly what you want. You get a follow-up phone call, and your product is going to be delivered at your doorstep in 6 weeks' time. So that's another way that they've been able to tackle customer service that is truly differentiate. Lots of great reasons here. This is a great campaign that focused, on that Airstream. And they call this campaign the Live Riveted Tour. And what they've done is focused on quality, image, and community. They are expensive. You can't say, prices could be a point of parity or differentiation, by the way. But they decided to push that aside because they are so expensive. And at the end of the day, these products are built to last, hence the Live Riveted Tour, and really create, and they never lose value, which really creates that ongoing experience and the Live Riveted position here. and they just, they look cool. So there's some examples. Does anyone want to reflect on any of these or bring up any notes of importance or interest or aha moments that you may have just had? Okay, let's talk about some research that is at your fingertips. So first of all, I told you we would touch on competitive analysis because, again, we could do an entire Q&A on this, but this is very, very important. When you are taking a look at a POP and POD grid, what you're going to be doing is comparing yourself against the competition in order to bring out the points of difference. So here on this page, you see a lot of different areas that you could explore from a competitive mindset to ultimately help you compare and contrast to bring you to differentiation. So market share could be one of those. The year the family or the year the company was founded, we saw with our first example with Mints that was very important to all three brands. It was a way for them to differentiate by length of business or location of business. Reputation, the marketing strategy, certainly the target market and the messaging. The brand appeal, customer service is something we're going to talk about in a little bit. Operational basics, Michelle, this is, we're open from 7 to 5 each day or 9 to 6 or ATMs 24 hours. We've got good customer service. Those are basics, right? How we immerse a customer into that could be a point of differentiation. But just be thinking about all of these elements when you are developing that POP/POD grid. Then what we're going to do is how do we obtain all of this information? So this is a short list of research that is at your fingertips. What we do when we're developing a POP/POD analysis is take a look at social media. What is the engagement? Moreover, what are people saying? So what are they saying about your brand, about the competition? Those are great research areas to ultimately tell us where we should focus. There are wonderful review sites out there that give us a glimpse into the same sort of information. For those B2B listeners today, G2 Crowd is a great area for you to explore, and they actually do some product comparisons for you. Certainly Consumer Reports, Amazon. There are 40 other review sites out there right now. You can Google them and reach them, or Google them and get a list of them in areas that you should be taking a look at. The press is a great area where we obtain market releases and stories on what is happening in the marketplace. Websites is a no-brainer. What are they saying about themselves? Something interesting to think about here is most often people are talking about what they do and how they do it, not why the customer should care. And that is an area that most brands out of the chute can create immediate differentiation in by just twisting the way that they are positioning themselves through messaging. And you see a bunch of other components here on the list that are very, very important when determining what your points of parity and differentiation are. When we're conducting these sort of tools for our clients, quite often we will also do market studies where we can study segmentation. What is it that people are talking about? We'll do industry opinion pieces and ask people to respond. Annual reports are another great area. But just be thinking about this when you are, you don't need to go to huge lengths to ultimately find the great information that you need at your fingertips here. Any reflection as we move into the third and final section here? Great. And I want to make sure by now you should have received your difference grid as well. And we're going to dive into that next.
Lori, I think there's a question in the chat.
Oh, great. Dave, could you take a look at that for me, please? I'm sorry, guys, I can't see chat right now. Oops, you're muted.
That would be helpful. Eric is asking if there's a way to take a point of parity and make it a point of differentiation.
Yes, and I'll give you a great example of that. So trust is a great point of parity, right? everyone should feel as though who they're working with should be trusted. And I even believe when you talk about trust, you should never have to say, trust me. It should be an innate feeling that you just embrace and that they should always feel. We've got 2 clients that we've worked on and carved out trust and even said trust as a point of differentiation over the years. And I'll talk about one right now. It's Big O Tires, which is TBC on the East Coast, and even Midas. They're all a part of the same brand. And we did a bunch of research with the corporate agency about 8 years ago. And, Big O Tires, they sell tires. One of the least trusted industries out there, right? And to say, trust us, we were like, oh my goodness. But we went after customers and we found out why they work with us, why they don't work with us. And the big thing they said was, we trust you over the competition. So we knew ultimately we needed to hang our hat on that. And what we positioned to the marketplace through differentiation was Big O Tires, the team you trust. Every piece of messaging, every piece of experiential interaction that they have, down to the way that they take orders, down to greeting someone at their car instead of having them come into the store. All of these components were deployed in an effort to create more trust, referral, and loyalty. Thank you for that question.
Yeah, I appreciate the answer. Thank you.
You bet. And I just also found out how I can see chat. So thank you, Anjali. I'm going to keep this up front here. So I'm not having to call on you, Dave, especially while you're muted. Anyways, continuing on here. So this is a very, very basic point of parity and point of difference grid. And I'm hopeful that as we've been talking about this and you've received these in your inbox, that you are making notes on maybe some of the top competitors down the left-hand column. Michelle, would you like to share with us, or Lisa, some competitors that you're currently facing in the market? Whoops, I think you're muted, Lisa.
Hey, competitors. What? We don't have competition, Lori. We just have other friends in banking. I would say credit unions like Elevations, we would consider a competitor. Alpine Bank has that same sort of philosophy, and so they're probably somebody else that we would look at. And those are probably the two biggies.
You know what I'd also like to just add is that I don't think that we spend a lot of time really concentrating on our competitors, and really more we concentrate on our customers and how we're serving the customers in the community, because I feel like that just is a differentiator in itself. So
yeah, no, I think that's really important. And that's why these grids become, it's so nice to have these at your desk all the time, right? And be taking notes on them. So if you're taking a look at, what was the first one you mentioned, Michelle?
Like Elevations.
Okay, so a credit union.
Credit unions.
So a credit union, yeah, they immediately have a great point of differentiation, right?
Because they're member based.
Yeah, exactly. And they organically have higher interest rates, all of that sort of stuff. So differentiating from credit unions as they've evolved more into day-to-day banking is a really important consideration for you from a differentiation standpoint. That you'd want to be considering. And Lisa, you bring up a great point too about focusing more on customers, which is equally important, right? But it allows, if we're taking a look at competitors more often, it does allow us to understand how they are also focusing on their customers to help us, develop that path that could be very, very unique. And Hannah, you had a great point. Do you want to share that with the group?
Sure, Lori, thank you. Earlier you mentioned how POD needs to constantly evolve. You gave a great example about FedEx. So I guess my question is there a typical timeline or shelf life? How often should we audit or assess our points of differentiation? And what are some key indicators that something that makes us stand out is actually shifting into that point of parity?
Right. So that's an excellent question. I really appreciate you asking it. And it's something that we really need to pay attention to, because there's nothing worse than having to play catch up, right? And so number one, making sure that you're monitoring what is happening in the marketplace is a key element here. So one of the ways that FedEx, just to continue along that thought stream for a minute, ended up and they had to catch up, because they used that position too long in the marketplace, and they caught up by allowing choice of ground and really taking what other brands weren't bringing out from a knowledge standpoint and raising awareness about it. So ground is a good example. Daily delivery was another example. And of course, air became ultimately what they were still able to compete on. But if you take a look at how UPS responded to that, it's a very, very interesting study, because they responded with Brown, the Brown campaign. So they were still delivering overnight, right? But they put their people first, not the method of delivery first, which I believe has catapulted UPS in the marketplace. I don't know if I'm correct or not, but if you take a look at that campaign, and women waiting for Brown to enter the door, through the doors, it did a great job of creating emotion instead of boom. Do you want it, freight, daily delivery, overnight, whatever it might be. So they were very, very smart in their response to that. And I love Brown, by the way. I would choose Brown over FedEx any days, because of that campaign. And we're going to go into that in a minute too, about an example of how an approach like that insulted a series of markets, of customers. Any other thoughts or questions here?
Lori, how do you do this when you're not in an established market, when you're starting in something that's completely new and there's not a broad competitor set?
And it's a great question, Angela, because so many people, especially entrepreneurs, they don't have the experience, right? And they don't necessarily know what's around the corner. They think they have a good idea, but it's interesting because most entrepreneurs, and all of us, are working for or are entrepreneurs, right? On some level. It doesn't matter if it was 50 years ago, 10 years ago, on some level, we're all involved in entrepreneurial organizations, and we have to start somewhere. And so simplicity is key. So we're going to talk a lot in a few minutes here about, do you challenge someone or do you challenge something? And that's actually another Q&A we're going to have downstream, but I'm going to give you 2 examples of how 2 of our clients had to challenge something because of that very question. Okay, so what I'm hopeful of, do you guys want to spend some more time walking through this? We talked about the competitors. Michelle, you gave us some great examples there. But what would be some key areas that some of you might want to focus on, back to this list that we had here. Let's see, I've got too many things open and I cannot get back there. Maybe I will. Back to this list here. Can some of you give some examples maybe on how product quality became something that was very important for you to study, or distribution channels, or pricing, or brand appeal? Any great examples there on what you might do to include that into a point of difference grid?
So question for you here, Lori, with all the difference grid, you had quality, fidelity, after sales service, things. I mean, there were several of them here. Are you saying that every single one of these is a potential to be able to research as far as a point of differentiation?
I think it would make us all mad, like mentally, if we'd be crazy if we had to continually stay on top of all of that. And some of them don't even apply. So what we suggest, great question, Eric, because it's very, very important. This is one of those situations where a little is going to go a lot further. And we suggest that you might take a look at 10 at most of those areas that you really need to focus on, but push the others aside for good reason. For instance, product may not be as applicable for a service organization as it is for a tech company who's building machines to dry out cell phones. So in some situations, service is the product, so that maybe it becomes a little bit more important. But we definitely suggest thinking through all those and then developing a list that you feel is important for the brand based on that. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, because I was trying to figure out all of those. I had taken screenshots, so I was like, this is going to take a while.
Well, we don't want you to sleep at night. Okay. Any other questions on how, or thoughts on how a POP/POD grid would help you further your business? Okay, let's roll up our sleeves and have a little bit more fun with some examples here. Okay, and really some key thoughts for you to think through as you're developing your points of differentiation. So differentiation needs to be purposeful. And what we mean by that is, if you're taking look and feel as a point of differentiation, you need to ask yourself if that look and feel is relevant to your audience, or if it's meaningful to the audience. Showing someone, on a skateboard with pink hair and really rough and tough for a cable provider selling, cable is, or selling remote controls is probably not the best way to differentiate yourself among the sea of sameness. So it needs to be purposeful. Here's an example of someone who took differentiation a bit too far. LG decided that they wanted to get into the mobile telephone arena. So they developed a very slim, cool looking phone that looked like every other phone out there. But guess what it did? It moved a little bit. It just showed, it moved with the shape of your butt a little bit, which they thought would be more comfortable in pockets. Guess what? Nobody cared. They developed differentiation, millions of dollars doing so. But the phone itself, there was no difference. It still did the same stuff. And so nobody bought the phone. And moreover, they looked at it as a ploy to buy the phone, which was insulting to their audiences. So it did not go well for LG in this situation. Here's another example of how differentiation, I teased this a minute ago, how aligning with your audience is something that's very, very important. If we're taking a look at this Huggies campaign, some of you may recognize this. This is a campaign that was launched about 10 years ago. And Huggies decided to go after men, knowing that the buyers of the product were females, but they decided to go after a male audience with this, and they referred to it as the dad test. This multicultural campaign ultimately pitted fathers against their children's dirty diapers. Once the spots started, and the whole goal was to prove Huggies diapers and wipes can handle anything through the toughest, most unimaginable situations, they ultimately ended up, trying to build daddyhood, but insulted every man on the planet with this campaign. The campaign hinged on the incorrect stereotype. It basically stated that men can't change diapers and that they don't do a good job changing diapers. So this is where creative for creative's sake ultimately differentiated in a way that hurt sales in the long run. And we talked about this a moment ago, Anjali, about challenging someone or challenging something. And these are two great examples. This is actually one of our own clients who just had a valuation of $750 million. They had an IPO 2 years ago at 250, and they'll be selling the company probably in a couple years at $1 billion. And this is was Rocore at the time. We helped the client move through the whole IPO and transition them to Redwire now. But challenging something was Old Space in this situation. They're an aerospace company, aerospace products company. And Old Space is the old way of doing things. It's going through 25 layers of approval, 25 floors in some situations of approval to get something, to market. It's cost. Cost was very, very expensive in aerospace. The commercialization of aerospace has brought space costs down tremendously. And moreover, it's an old way of thinking. So Old Space New Tricks was a way to differentiate this brand among hundreds of small, nimble startup space companies, space product companies. And ultimately, within 5 years, they were sold for an untold amount. And they're now, a part of this $750 million company. But they didn't challenge direct competition. They challenged mindset, the old way of doing things with innovation. Another unique product that we brought to market was a company by the name of TechDry that we also brought to Shark Tank. And TechDry, we were able to get them into 500 Staples stores throughout the United States with this product. And basically, TechDry dries out phones. Where do most phones get wet? Most phones get wet in the toilet. So at Shark Tank, and by the way, they did get funded by Mr. Wonderful. So they won. But what we knew with this product was we needed to educate the audience and have some tongue in cheek about what causes most phone accidents with water to just be more memorable. But moreover, the biggest competitor here is rice. Putting your phone in a rice bag, all you do is stay away from your phone for 24 hours. So actually clicking on all the buttons is what causes the phone not to work. So what we knew, the challenger here was not someone, it was a bag of rice. So all the go-to market strategies and what we, the campaigns that we utilized to drive people to store compared that and poked fun at people actually what they would do, what to do when you drop your phone in a toilet. So those are great examples on what to do when you challenge someone instead of something. So that's all I have today. Any additional reflections, or would you like to spend more time on the POD grid? Actually take some examples or questions on what you might have for your own brand right now. We're open to anything at this stage.
Yeah, I had one more question, and that
Great.
was about the product fidelity. What do you mean exactly by that?
So product fidelity is look and feel. And I'm going to give you another good example of this. So if you take a look at this product right here, the fidelity of it is not great. It wasn't pretty yet. And it didn't need to be yet, because what we were really getting budget for or investment for was to create a better looking product. And because we knew the systems and the process worked, it was proven, but we needed to go to manufacturing with a different look and feel. And even though these are behind the counter products, the fidelity of it was not awesome. We've got another product right now where we have pushed fidelity aside because we're still proving the concept. So the question, Eric, is a very, very interesting one, because fidelity can relate back to something also you asked about, Anjali, and that's timing. So some of these points of parity and points of differentiation might be all about timing. If you're early stage, all you need to do is prove that the product works and that you've got a reoccurring revenue stream. Product fidelity can come downstream and you can make it look better, It needs to operate the same, but you can make it look better downstream. So great question. And Hannah, I love your point here about the rice bag is not that pretty. And guess what? You have peace of mind with this product in actually 16 minutes versus, and is it going to restore all of my, photos and, passwords and all that as well. So I love that point.
That's awesome.
Any other thoughts today? Okay, well, you guys are absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for your interplay, for your questions. We are always a phone call or an email away. And remember, you'll be receiving an email follow-up with us in the next 24, 48 hours with a link to this presentation and all of the, and you already do have the POD grid to start working on as well. So please be different out there. Rise to the occasion, climb to the top of that mountain because it truly is what will create a winning go-to-market strategy. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Lori and team Avocet.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.